Welcome to WBC Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, the CEO of WBC. For those of you that don't know, WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 80 organizations focused on women's leadership and diverse leadership across the business landscape, and hundreds of business leaders who are coming together, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We also live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, our staff, our board of directors, and our WBC champions include more than 34% people of color. And every single one of our 9 action initiatives, our 4, have DEI goals for 2025 and 2030. So please check the chat for the 4 areas through which we aim to accelerate change, starting with women in the boardroom, and join our movement at wbcollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up of women's voices for change, and by showcasing leaders committed to allyship, inclusivity, and driving corporate purpose. So today, at the end of Women's History Month, I'm delighted to be joined by 2 incredible leaders in the WBC community. Anna Dutra, a former WBC board member and the co-chair of our Women in the Boardroom Action Initiative, and Susan Paley, the vice president of chapter networks at the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, one of our key partner organizations. And at WBC, we are proud to work with over 20 organizations that are committed to achieving equity in the boardroom. So one of our 4 action initiatives is the Women in the Boardroom. And through this action initiatives, we work closely with our partners and our champions like Anna and Susan to diversify the boards of directors of public companies by aggregating data, by sharing those out in monthly reports. But we also work on amplifying the opportunities that exist for organizations and companies working to advance women in the boardroom to come together and create impactful change. So as you can see, we are really trying to drive impact. And so that's what we really want to talk about. What is actually really happening? So first, Anna and Susan, welcome. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you.
So at our recent event for International Women's Day, we heard from a panel of board leaders who discussed the critical importance of topics impacting the boardroom, like building the pipeline, right? Issues impacting board governance, the increased need and use of AI, but also cybersecurity expertise, and the impact of the sort of pushback around DE and ESG on the board of directors. So let's talk about what are your observations about this current landscape, and what does this look like from the board perspective? Anna, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Gwen. First of all, it is such a pleasure to be here with you and Susan, 2 amazing leaders, and have the opportunity to share our point of view. As you know, I've been serving on boards for about 20 years now, so I have seen the change in landscape and the evolution, and in particular, the steady increasing interest and numbers of women in the boardroom. So your question has 2 parts, right? In terms of women in the boardroom, I think we're seeing, number one, more interest. Definitely tons of capable women, and boards have been more proactive about, when doing a search, asking for a diverse slate, which is something that 20, 15 years ago just did not happen, right? But searches now, they come with a 50-50 gender split. The other thing is you asked about was about changes in terms of demand for specific expertise, right? And I think that on that, the pendulum swung a couple of times. So we went first from only looking, when I started, if you had not led a P&L in a large organization, you would have very slim chances of joining a board, in particular a public company board. I think we shift that to a better understanding of the value that functional leadership brings to the boardroom as well. But there's a big but there. So we went from a time when everybody expected the SEC to require that every board would have to have a cybersecurity expert in the room, and suddenly you see lots of CISOs joining the boardroom. Then D&I was highlighted, so we saw more CHROs and chief talent officers in the boardroom. But regardless of what specific expertise you bring to the table, I think we're getting to a point now where we recognize that we have to use board seats very wisely. So you cannot be, as a board director, unidimensional, right? I've served in boards where you have the cybersecurity expert who only talks cyber. You have to be first a great problem solver, business leader, understand business, and then be an expert in one particular area. So I think that that's what we're seeing now, and I actually appreciate that trend and the direction we're moving towards.
Well, Gwen, I want to co-sign on what Anna just presented, starting with her comment at the top about what a delight it is to be here with two amazing, powerful women. So it's a pleasure to be invited. Everything Anna just said, I can underscore by saying we've come a long way. I oversee for NACD the search practice. And when our clients come asking us for a slate of highly eligible individuals who will truly serve as strategic assets for the organization, taking up one of those very valuable coveted board seats, they inevitably want to have a very diverse slate presented to them. So we've come a distance on that. And there was a survey done a couple of years ago, and Gwen, maybe this is part of the stats that you send out that you referenced in your newsletters, but I think it was Crunchbase and Him for Her who did a survey maybe 3 years ago about some of the best funded private company organizations that on their boards, 14% of the seats were taken by women, and that for women of color, there were as many of those on the boards they surveyed as there were people named Dave or David. So we've probably heard numbers like this in publicly traded companies. For the S&P 500 today, there are 33% of the board seats are held by women. And that's the good news is that's up from 25% some time ago. And just for our number comparative at NACD, we think that across all company types and industries, there's about 23% women on boards. And at NACD, our members, who are board members themselves, about more than a third of them are women. So they're in the game, they're in the conversation. So we see that in terms of ticking upward in the conversation, because as Anna pointed out, back in the day, you had to be more or less a CEO or CFO to get one of those coveted board seats. Those days are over. Now we're in a volatile, complex world. And so we need those diverse skill sets in the boardroom. If you're a chief people officer, a CHRO, a CMO, certainly a CISO, a chief information security officer, cyber expert, AI, those are where we're focused. And people are bringing those skills. And they have to be a team player in that sense of knowing all about governance and board service. But those are their subject matters, their expertise are loud and proud on. And I think that that diversity is increasingly showing us not just gender or race, but cognitive and experiential diversity. So that's the landscape we're seeing at the moment.
So I think, yeah, and it's what you just said, Susan, too. You know, our monthly report of just the appointment to public boards recently, like February, women were 27.9, just about 28%, right? And so I think we've been, you know, sort of at a 30%, getting close. We were 30 a couple of years ago. Legislation changes the pushback, but you know, as both of you, like Anna, you sit on a board and you kind of see this evolution as well. So you talked about sort of sets and expertise, right? I want to push a little bit on that kind of like, you know, what does it look like for the leadership and then in leading in the board, and what's exciting about this evolution as we look at, you know, sort of 30% somewhat of commitment, you know, what excites you right now? More.
Yeah, I think that we've been working diligently and very intentionally on the numbers, right? And in particular, around 2019, 2020, right after California, Illinois, and Massachusetts issued their laws requiring that more women a particular percentage of women had to occupy board seats of companies that were headquartered in those states. Too bad that just last year the California Supreme Court revoked the law. But during that time, we saw a clear peak. We got to a point at WBC, we have a partnership with Equilar, where we track the numbers monthly, right? So in 2020, 2021, 2022, we went up 1 year to 42%. That was incredible. As soon as the law was revoked, we saw a dip, and I think that now we're plateauing in about 30%, a third of that, but quite frankly, if you look at the number of women in business schools, it is the same, 30%. So we're not lagging or tracking behind. If you look at management teams in corporate America, it is probably even below 30%, and certainly in the Fortune 500 companies, you have way less than 30% of women CEOs. But I think there's another aspect to that, right, which is leadership in the boardroom. We're making the numbers, and that's diversity. Now we need to guarantee and to be equally intentional about inclusion and power and equity, right? And I serve on a particular board on a public company where we have not only 5 women, but 2 of them are committee chairs. And that is progress. That when we really have our voices heard. And I'll say even something else, which is I notice a clear difference when 2 things happen. When you have the second woman joining the board, and when we have a woman chairing NomGov. That's when it's never forgotten that we not only need to have the numbers, but we also need to have equal voice in the boardroom. But do you see the same thing, Susan? What are you seeing as you do searches and as you help boards to become better boards and bring new directors in? What are you seeing?
Yeah, Anna, absolutely. I think that we have an understanding that everyone must be an individual contributor, and that's table stakes just to get in the door. The group matters, that board culture matters, that it is a team sport at the end of the day. That's why we have, before the board meeting, the night before, you come for a board dinner. You may have an intellectual conversation that's really stirring people's minds around similar content. And I think that we look at our own conference rooms, right, ladies, when we are in a meeting and the room all looks the same versus when you bring in different gender perspectives, different racial perspectives and so forth. And as I said, cognitive diversity in every sense. Those non-gov committee chairs, they bring something to who the next, and we talked about pipeline, Gwen, earlier, who the pipeline is of tomorrow's board directors. So culture trumps everything else sometimes.
No, and I think that's incredibly important. And Anna, you were also talking, and I know, Susan, you're really working at like effective governance, right? So talking sort of about the skills and expertise, right? So that people can be in positions of power on the board, not just get on the board, but be in that. And what are some of those other skills, right? You talked a little bit about those, but I just want to kind of drill down a bit more.
Yeah, I think that the best performing boards know that, to the point we were just discussing, the culture matters. So first of all, you are not just coming in to have sharp elbows and show what you know. You have those listening skills, those what we used to call softer skills. That phrase can make you cringe a little bit, but it's not the subject matter expertise as much as it is understanding that when you elevate yourself from an executive position to a board position, your job changes. So what we see is that people are noticing, they get in there like, oh, what got me here doesn't get me to the next position. And so in the boardroom, we're listening, we're doing what classically we call NIFO, which is nose in, fingers out. We remember we're not managing, we're not operators. And those are where the successful boards have the ability to really serve as that long-term asset and see not just how we did this quarter, but to see how we're looking over the horizon. And that learning agility is important, not just as individuals, but also as a whole group. Again, it's sort of a team sport. And I think that another important skill that they bring is the staying aware, because we're in, again, a volatile, complex world. Just the pace of business is unlike everything we've had for the past decades. And so when people are staying up with what they need to have, and again, any organization, I mean, NACD is the one that I represent, but there are a lot of things where people can go and further and deepen their experience. So at NACD, we're holding master classes on just this week, cyber and artificial intelligence, next level thinking. And we have an accelerate program where people can come in without currently having a board seat, but they're almost board ready, or they are board ready. So they spend a year or two immersing themselves in the basic knowledge, and they take our exam, our sort of NACD directorship certification exam, and pass it. So they go in with that sort of confidence when they're in the boardroom, knowing I've got the chops and I've got that starting level of information. And that's critical. So you are actually serving the board in the way that you were invited to.
Well, that actually,
and I can confirm everything that Susan is saying. As an NACD faculty and contributor and engaged member, one thing that I always tell aspiring directors, right? And I'm always getting the calls, what do I need to do and all that. And I ask, well, when was the last time that you went to training, you took a certification, you attended a program? And if, quite frankly, if the person says, oh, I either never did it or it was over 2 years ago, I say, you know what? In my book, you wouldn't even be a candidate. So I always shout, I say, listen, go take Director of Professionalism 101, which we're actually, I'm working with an ACD in changing, revamping the program and changing the names. Go take your director certification every year. Then after that, pick a topic. It could be the CERT certification, which is a partnership between NACD and Carnegie Mellon. It could be audit. It could be climate, ESG. There is so much to learn. And longer gone are the days when board members would just sit in the room and just hope that they were educated by the board. We have to be proactive to be excellent directors.
So that's this is great, because I'm going to move on sort of, the proactive piece a little bit in kind of a different angle, right? So we're all part of a collaborative, right? We're Women Business Club. We talk about collaborating. Anna, you and I worked with the WBC to build the 75 board directors certified in cyber, the Women Cyber Governance Collaborative, right? We have our action initiative I talked about at the beginning, which NACD is a part of. How important is collaboration in allowing us to get to kind of where we want to be, where this, 30% is reflective, but is sustainable and keeps going?
Yeah, listen, there's power in the numbers. There's power in intention, and there's power in what I call pay it forward, right? And I'm a firm, I always say that, I'm a firm believer in karma. You don't help another woman to get ready and get on a board. Shame on you. Karma is out there. So I think that the collaboration happens not only across organizations, as you mentioned, Gwen. We have over 20 organizations in our WBC board initiative, but it's also across individuals. One thing that I always say, listen, if you get a call for an opportunity, a board opportunity, and you're not qualified, you're not interested, you're conflicted, don't just hang up the call and say, oh, I'm not a candidate for that. Give 3 names of strong women. How many times I get a call saying, oh, we're trying to find a qualified technology expert or a qualified financial expert. It's so hard to find women. Like, oh, wait a second. I have a whole folder here. I have a whole file. I'll send you 10 names. Pick one from those. And if you don't like any, give me a call and I'll give you more names, right? Send candidates to Susan. Send candidates to Gwen. I mean, we cannot guarantee that we're going to place you, but we will certainly try, and we will certainly advocate for you.
Yeah, Gwen, I would add to that, absolutely, Anna, and I would add, when you asked how we can raise the power of our voice, I think that listen, we all understand that diversity is not just a want to have, it's a need to have now. That's fait accompli. And I think that boards can increasingly hold management responsible for ensuring there's gender parity at the C level and the pipeline to the C level, but that's where board members are born.
Absolutely. So this is the perfect, I feel it coming. You guys feel it coming? What is the call to action, right? what's the call to action? I always say, what's the call to action to, businesses and boards? But like, what is the call to action? Susan, you're right. I see it. What's the call to action?
Well, I had a feeling you might ask us this, Gwen. So I had three things I'll offer. I'll fire off real quick as we're closing in on the timing. One of them is that I don't need to tell your audience, but I will say it, get involved. Just watching this particular live stream or the recording of it means that you have an interest in it, and that's 50% of the battle. So whether it's this network, NACD, or any other valuable networks across the country, find your network and get involved. Secondly, I think it's a trio for me. Know your stuff, know your audience, and know yourself. Board services isn't for everyone. Figure out if that's the case. Get in conversations. And my third one is to the point that Anna made earlier. If you're not helping another woman, take a look at yourself, put out your hand and help that other woman. My friend has a great phrase, and she says as a little mantra, goodness doesn't just flow to me, it flows through me.
Love that. Love that. Anna.
Oh, how beautiful, Susan. We could almost
know.
close right there, right? So I'll add just one to you. As you look at companies, or you serve in boards, or you're looking at board composition, praise the ones that actually encourage and support diversity and inclusion, that have 2, 3, 4, 5 women. I serve on a board with 5 women. I mean, who would ever imagine that? Public company, global company, super dynamic. And also call out the ones that don't and ask why, right? So don't be afraid to do that, but don't just call out, also compliment and praise the ones that are doing the right thing, because there are several amazing companies out there that are doing the right thing in terms of creating diverse, innovative, dynamic boards, and that just reflects on their performance as well.
Absolutely. And that's so in that is thanking both of you, right? For working together as we all do, for recognizing those companies and where the progress is, and for continuing to work and promote one another. So thank you both again.
Thank you
for your time and expertise.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Anna. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, both of you.
It is. It's a pleasure. We will continue this conversation throughout events. WBC has our next virtual event, May 15th. Of course, our Action for Impact Summit, where we get to highlight those companies that have boards with parity, which is incredibly exciting. But as you noted, Susan, that's all we have time for today. So to the audience, we invite you to wbcollaborative.org to learn more about WBC's initiatives focused on not just increasing women in the C-suite and boardroom, but addressing the underrepresentation of women in STEM and addressing the available capital for women, but really being there to advance a pipeline of women leaders that are going to bring gender and pay equity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. So join us weekly to keep up to date on the progress, on the movement for gender equity in business and the latest issues by following us at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Have a wonderful